Welcome back. This is the card review for Scholomance Academy. I got that right. I know I got that right.
Good job.
Yes.
Excellent.
Oh, it's only hour 2, and I already got Scholomance Academy down. Still a terrible name. But okay. So this is Adwikta.
This is Merps. We are going to be talking about other neutral cards. We just talked about the top 6 neutral cards, which are really pretty close to each other,
Yeah.
within 10 points of each other. Now we're going to go a small step below, but a step below, and talk about the sort of, the next level of neutral cards. Once again, Chillwind Yeti is a 113, so that will give you a little bit of an idea of where these cards stand. And the next 2 cards, or really the next 3 cards, 4 cards, have like the exact same score.
5 cards, 6 cards. Really, we're entering an area where we're just talking about good cards. Cards that are a little bit better than a Yeti. You should take them over a Yeti. And cards that are not too far off from the cards that we were talking about in the last video. Like, if you want to take these cards over those cards, I'm not going to be like, oh, you are like terrible at this game. I'm going to be like, well, you're probably losing a tiny bit of value, but who really cares, right? Like,
yeah. So all right, let's start off with animated Broomstick, which is coming out at 120. By the way, I'll say the scores, but just so you guys are clear, the next many cards, same score, exact same score, within 3 points of each other.
Yeah.
So animated Broomstick is a 1 mana 1/1 with Rush, Battle Cry, give your other minions Rush. It's pretty good. Look, this is one of those cards.
Oh my god, this card has Rush?
Yeah, it has Rush.
I didn't even know this card had Rush. God, it's even better than I thought.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And it gives all of your other minions Rush. So it's one of those 1-drops that you really want to play in later on, right? So later on, it's quite good. It's pretty good. And it's one of those.
ZD Manachaz says, "Don't worry, I did it right." So our technical director was actually inputting these. He's way better at actually inputting things right than I am at reading these things right.
Sometimes you see adults to be like, "Oh, whoa, this thing like has like X attribute." No, don't think that we overlooked it because he's not inputting.
I focused in on how to correctly implement the give your other minions rush part because that was not a mechanic that was in the game before. Okay.
Yeah. So look, animated Broomstick is one of those cards in which a lot of times for small cards, their value, what is keeping their score high, is their worth on turn 1. And what lowers their score is their worth on later turns. It's the opposite with something like animated Broomstick, in which the first turn, it's a 1 mana 1/1. It sucks. But later on, it can be game changing. It could be game winning in a way. So that's where you get this sort of like opposite push and pull effect with the animated Broomstick, and it ends up being a pretty good, good card at 120.
Yeah. This is just, it's like, you remember Rocket Boots? It was like a 2 mana card. It gave one of your minions Rush. It drew a card. Usually 1 extra mana drawing a card is a pretty fair trade-off. So it's basically like 1 mana and you give your minion Rush. And then there's also this card called Charge, where for 1 mana you give your minion Rush. And they're not great cards, let's be honest. Charge is really a terrible card. Rocket Boots is like an okay card. I remember that card very clearly because we did the algorithm wrong when we first did Give Rush, and so we thought it was an amazing card, and it was not an amazing card. But now we know how Give Rush works very well, so we know what's going on. But here's a 1 mana card that's a 1/1 Rush, which is pretty okay for a 1 mana card, right? This is like Boar. It's not good, but it's okay. And then on top of that, for a free ability, you don't just give other people, you give all your other minions Rush. Like, what the hell? Like, this is a card when I looked at it, I was like, really? And then I thought about it, and I was like, all right, I guess it's not, like, super busted. You know? Like, because, like you said, right, late in the game, you don't really want a 1 mana card that gives you a 1/1. So its ability is compensating for it. And then earlier in the game, it's just kind of a 1 mana 1/1. So it's a very well-balanced, good throughout the game kind of card. Like, I like it.
Yeah, it's good. And for a 1 mana card to be this high, actually, it speaks to how good it is later in the game, because it is hard for 1 mana cards to be like super duper high, especially in the quote neutral class, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty tough.
Yeah, and you want it, like, this really feels like a class card. But, like, what you want to do is the game wants to give you enough tools to swing the game in whatever direction. Especially if you bog things down by printing Smug Senior, you need equal ways to break through. Now, I don't think the game is lacking for ways to break through, but Animated Broomstick is your big way to break through from neutral. Everybody gets access to it. It's pretty good. It's not like unfairly good. And you should just be ready to have a whole bunch of initiative come your way. That can't go face, but you'll just see this card a lot, and it will impact all the games. It's just one of those meta-relevant everywhere cards.
Yep. Okay, next is a big card. We're going to go to a big card. And this is Plagued Proto Drake coming in at a 120 as well. This is an 8-mana, 8/8 dragon with Death Rattle, summon a random 7-cost minion. It's just a huge stat stick, you know? It's a big, giant stat stick that is hard to get rid of, and it's good. The problem is it doesn't have taunt, it doesn't have initiative. The 7-cost minion, the variability is pretty high.
Yeah, it could be overall, insanely good, and it could be trash.
Yeah, exactly. And the initial body, 8 mana for just an 8/8, it can be dangerous. It could be unusable sometimes, but it does give you a lot of stats. So that's why it's a 120.
Yeah, like keep in mind the 7-cost body doesn't come out for a while. You have 8 health, and your opponent's not in a hurry to kill it, so you have to kill it. So it's probably not coming out for like 3 more turns, or like for 2 more turns if you can kill your Plague Proto Drake off in 2 turns. And then it doesn't have initiative, so you don't get to use it for 3 turns. Like, it's just very delayed stuff. Like I mentioned before, there is an upcoming change in 2 weeks to like very base level system changes that'll probably raise the score of this card, these like dumb big cards, by like 5%. So I think it's fair to think of this as like a 127 card. Like maybe it should have belonged in the other video. But then a lot of the cards in the other video are going to move up a few points as well. So it's just, I remember when this card came out, someone like tagged me on a Reddit post too and was like, oh, and the #1 rated comment for this card is just like, oh my god, busted in Arena. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, I guess it's good. I don't really quite see what the fuss is about. And then it goes in the algorithm and it's like, yeah, you know what? It's just a good card. What's a card around here? Like Dalaran Crusader, right? Like Dragon Maul Sky Stalker. Like, are Dalaran Crusaders and Dragon Maul Sky Stalkers really, really good? Are they super overstated? Yeah. But that's all they are. They're not, like, defining the entire game, you know? They're just, like, very good neutrals. And that's kind of where this guy falls. He's a very good neutral. And the fact that he's a dragon, remember, dragon tags don't really do much anymore. Like, the dilution for dragon synergies is so huge after this set. With its offering bonus comes, it's going to be, like, nearly no dragon synergies. Like, you'll pull one off now and then it'd be like, haha, I got a dragon synergy.
Yep. Next, we have another small card. We went small to big, all the way back to small. We have Tour Guide coming in, also at a 120. Tour Guide is a 1-mana 1/1 battle cry. Your next hero power costs 0. Once again, this is one of those cards in which the score is going to differ class to class. Just to give you guys an example, in Rogue, Tour Guide is a 134. So, obviously, if you play Tour Guide on 1, what happens is on turn 1, you get a 1/1 and you get a dagger. That's amazing. That's really, really good. So, for example, Tour Guide in Rogue is a lot higher. And, this is just another one of those cards that you get a lot of bang for your buck, and that helps make up for the fact that it's a 1-mana card, which hurts a lot usually if you draw it in the late game.
Yep. And that's the same comment, but in the reverse side for Plague Proto Drake. This is the exact kind of card that will drop in score when our change is made in 2 weeks. So yeah, we have it at a 120 here, but it's probably like a 115, 112, maybe even 110. Like still like Yeti-ish level, right? I think it still belongs to this video, but I would put an asterisk on the 120. And like Merp said, the 120 doesn't even matter because it's just an average of a bunch of different scores. from a bunch of
Yep.
different classes. In terms of like card design, yeah. Sorry, you want to bring up some more scores?
Yeah, so like we can look at it for Rogue. It is quite high at a 134. For Demon Hunter, it is sitting at a 102, so barely above 100. And when you're at 100, these are not great cards anymore. Like these are passable.
100 is Argent Squire and like Fish Flinger.
Yeah, they're okay cards. So once again, this is one of those cards that the variation is pretty big because hero powers are quite different, and they're good. And the quality of the hero power and the cheapened hero power, the value of that will differ a lot. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can put an asterisk next to this.
Yeah, from an arena perspective, I really like this because it's a nice 1-drop that you can play and then get the value out of later. That's how you like to design 1-drops. And you're not getting an absurd amount of value, but you're getting more value than you normally would. That's why it's a 120 right now. It'll still end up like a 110 or something. It's like a very playable 1-drop that's not over-tempoed and is not drawing you cards, right? It's like banking some of its tempo power for you to use later. And whenever you use a hero power, that's anti-tempo. So it's like banking card advantage, really. Like if you think about it deep enough, it like goes into many layers and then reverses itself and all sorts of fancy things. It's quite an interesting card to think about playing it on curve. When you get it later on in the game, and remember, this is going to be more relevant for longer periods of the game than you think because there's going to be more cards being stuffed into your hand. So this 2 mana savings will be relevant for far more turns in the game than you're used to.
Yeah. And last, I'm not going to go through all of the scores, but I do see people curious. It's like, oh, is Rogue the highest? Rogue is not the highest. It's actually Paladin.
And well, that because of tempo. Yeah. Like turn 1, 2 1/1s, right?
This card in Paladin is a 141. So you are pushing like some really premium cards there.
Yeah.
But if you know how Paladins play, I think you would understand how good Tour Guide is. So yeah, in a class like Paladin, it's a 141.
Yeah, DKSH says like Lost in the Jungle. Yeah, exactly. It's like Lost in the Jungle. Remember how insane that card was? This is Lost in the Jungle without the synergy.
Right. So it's just really, really freaking good in Paladin. And in a lot of other classes, it is a significantly below average card.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good caveat. All right. Next card is 1 point lower than the other 3 cards, which are identical in points. We've seen this before. We're not going to talk much about it. It's Divine Rager. It's a 4 mana 5/1 Divine Shield, which is the same as that 4 mana 5/1 Death Rattle. Give you a 4 mana 5/1 Death Rattle. Give you a 4 mana 5/1.
Curse Disciple.
Curse Disciple. Yeah. So it's the same thing, except it's an elemental, but there's not really elemental synergies in the meta right now. So it's a 119. It's really good. You take it over a Yeti, right? That's kind of it.
Yeah. The attack matters. I think people always overestimate their ability to ping.
Yeah.
So
remember, you don't want to take 5 damage to your face, especially if you're a rogue or a demon hunter.
Yeah. So it's good. Like, and it is within 6 points of Yeti, but I do agree it is a little bit better than Yeti. Like, I would take this over Yeti, because the Yeti stat line, it's just not doing as much work as it used to do. Mm-hmm. So, yep.
Cool. All right. Next, we have Bigger Cave Hydra. It is a 5 mana 4/6 Lake Thresher. It's a beast. Also damages the minions next to whomever this attacks. So it's a cleave. We have a neutral cleave now. It's okay. Like it's better than a Yeti, but it's an understated 5-drop. Like it really just follows the Cave Hydra formula, right? Cave Hydra's a 3 mana 2/4. This is a 5 mana 4/6. They both cleave. I remember when Cave Hydra came out, everyone was like, "This is the most insane card," and we never rated it all that high. Same thing here. Like cleaves are just like most cards you put on the board never get to attack. Like I don't know if you just think through when you play minions that have no initiative, most of them don't ever get to attack. They're just dead. And in that case, you've just played a really for this meta understated drop. And then if it gets to attack, your opponent has to have 2 minions, or else its ability does nothing.
the best cleaves are the cleaves that have initiative, right?
Yes.
There's a reason why something like, for example, Super Collider is amazing because you can use it immediately, or like a lot of, we've seen the cleave effect a lot on weapons, but then weapons, the reason those are good is more so because of the weapon effect.
Yeah.
So this is fine, and for something understated to be higher than a Yeti, it takes some major lifting, and we give a decent amount of credit to the effect. But yeah, like you're just not going to be able to attack with this a decent amount of times. And once again, like giving up any stats right now is a huge price to pay because,
Yeah.
as we've seen in the past, like 2 expansions, definitely, the norm now is not to give up any stats for an additional beneficial effect.
Mhm.
So whenever you are giving up any stats for a beneficial effect, even one as good as this one, right? Cleave is quite good. You really have to weigh it against all of these other cards, which literally give up 0 stats to gain once again, a pretty beneficial effect.
Yeah, and remember back to our themes. 6-drops are a thing now. So your opponent probably has the option to play a 6-drop. So if you drop this on 5, your opponent knows you dropped this and has no initiative. They're not going to play multiple minions. If they have multiple minions, they're going to throw it into this guy first. Like, if I happen to have, like, a 3-2 on the board, and I'm about to put down a 5-drop, I'm going to put down my, or like a 6-drop. I'm going to throw my 3-2 into this guy, and then I'm going to play my 5-7 taunt, right? Which isn't even that good, like, in terms of the tempo for the board. And then your Lake Thresher does nothing. So your opponent can like easily play around your Lake Thresher. You give them a lot of heads up for it. Like, its ability still did something. It forced your opponent to like suicide a minion into here for only 1 damage, whereas it would normally be dealing 3 damage to your face. But it's just not like the insane ability you think it is. Like, the ability is not really to cleave anything. The ability is to force your opponent to deal with it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's kind of it. That's kind of where the Thresher is. Next, we have Colt Neophyte. Colt Neophyte is a 2-mana 3/2 battle cry. Your opponent's spells cost 1 more next turn. It's coming in at a 117. So to give you an idea, Bloodfen Raptor is a 103. So Colt Neophyte, it's gaining a decent amount of points for this ability. And
this is where Wild Pyromancer and Quicksand Elemental are. They're both 2-mana 3/2s with abilities. So these are good abilities.
These are good abilities. And because of the emphasis on spells and the power of spells, right? Colt Neophyte, kind of the value of this spell disruption comes from how powerful spells are expected to be and how important casting spells are expected to be. And once again, if you looked at the themes here, spells are quite important. So any sort of disruption, and a 1-mana disruption is pretty big. I think it's a lot bigger than people might give it credit for.
And it's all their spells. So they're trying to cast 2 spells. They're just screwed. They have to cast 2 extra mana down the drain.
So it's getting a lot of points for it, but like if spells are that important, this will be that good. So this is a little bit better than the Yeti at a 117.
Yep, and this is a rare card, by the way. It's the first rare card we come across. Everything else we've done since Transfer Student and Voracious Reader, they've been common. And these days, when they print cards, they print like 30 common cards and then like 3 rares, 3 epics, and 5 legendaries. So you're just not going to see a lot of rare cards and not a lot of epic cards because of Demon Hunter. Because they're just printing a lot of Demon Hunter cards. This is not like the old sets. It's been like this since Ashes of Outlands.
Yep.
Next up, we have another 117 card, same score as Colt Neophyte, another 2-drop, 2-mana 2/3, common beast, Mana Feeder Panthera, Battlecry. If you use your hero power this turn, draw a card. So, keep in mind, this card is basically gaining like 20 points from a Croc in order to draw a card if you don't have to play it on curve. So
yeah, and like this is exactly what you want your small cards to do. You want your small cards obviously to be applicable when it's the early game, but you don't want them to be worthless or close to worthless later on in the game. And that's what Mana Feeder Panthera prevents. You are able to basically just cycle it, replace it, and still put something out on the board later on in the game. Not like an amazing, ridiculous effect, but something that's quite useful and something that Blizzard has been doing with their small cards for quite a while. They want to reduce the downside of it. They want small cards that don't give you all of its value / power immediately, and like give you this choice, right? It's like, well, if you wait, you should be rewarded for waiting.
And also, if you top deck it, you're not totally screwed, right? They also don't like the feeling of just like getting into top deck wars in the end. Like you should be screwed a little because you got unlucky, but not like, oh my god, I know I top deck Elven Archer and I have like 8 more mana to spend.
Yeah. So once again, this is so much better than something like Gnomish Inventor. Gnomish Inventor is an 84. Remember when Gnomish Inventor years ago, but remember when Gnomish Inventor was good?
It was like an above average card.
Yeah, it was known as an above average card. Now Gnomish Inventor is at an 84. This is where, the doldrums of Arena are, okay? Gnomish Inventor is like, an Oasis Snapjaw Lord of the Arena level card now. And for good reason, right? It's like, wow, you're giving up so much stats to draw a card. Big ol' Whelp is just laughing at you. Big ol' Whelp is like, you gave up how many stats to draw a card? Wait, and you don't have a tribe either? You don't have a tag that enables things and feeds off of other things? Like, what? So, that's sort of where we're at. And Mana Feeder Panthera is obviously so much more powerful than Gnomish Inventor. The ability to play it earlier on for tempo, and then later on, your ability to cycle it. It's just so flexible, much better.
Yeah, and I like that it's not overpowered. Like, this is a really good design. Like, I like when 2 mana cards come in at like around Yeti level and they're good on curve. And I see Verb Object in chat basically asking, predicting that it'll be played for tempo 70% of the time. If this is your only 2-drop, you definitely play it for tempo. Do not just like hold on to it unless you're like rogue or something, or like your hero power would actually be relevant on that turn. Like, this is, you do play it. Like, drawing a card is good, but it's like a cycle in the late game, right? Because in the late game, adding a 2/3 on the board is not really doing much for you. So, but like, don't like save it for the value of drawing a card.
Yeah. So I see something that people are talking about in chat, and I think this is a good discussion, and I want to touch upon it for a second, because we talked about how, for example, the Gnomish Inventor has gone down so much, right? Meanwhile, Yeti is at a 113, and we said that years ago, Gnomish Inventor was as good as a Yeti.
It was not as good as a Yeti. It was always worse than a Yeti.
No. It was like kind of close, much closer than it was now. Like, now it is like ridiculous. It's laughable, right? 30 points is huge on the tier list. There was a point before where it was much closer. And part of that comes from, there's many reasons. Number one, we talked about it, the ridiculousness of card generation, card draw, and the quality of that. Not just of the body that gives you the card, but the cards that are being generated. For example, you're finding dragons. Dragons are really freaking good. So it's like things that generate dragons, not only are the original bodies really good, but the things that you generate, like Twin Tyrants, are ridiculous and amazing. So you giving essentially you giving up stats to draw a card, well, that ability to draw a card has been sort of repeated over and over and over again.
The number of what a card is worth is less the more cards you have. And now you have a lot of cards, and you used to have very few cards. That's it. Mana Feeder Panthera, someone was asking what it is in Demon Hunter, because it's supposed to be like a possibly constructed level Demon Hunter neutral. It's a 131, so it gains like I don't know, like 15 points. That's quite
That's a lot.
significant.
Yeah.
But Demon Hunters have 1 mana hero powers. So it's actually like on curve on turn 3 and drawing a card, right? So, yeah. And that also means it's probably lower in all the other classes than this. It's probably just like Yeti level or something. But yeah. Moving on. This is an interesting one. You want to take this one?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Okay, so this we're talking about Steward of Scrolls. This is coming at a 116. Once again, basically the same as the previous like 4 or 5 cards. A 5 mana 4/4 elemental, spell damage +1. Where have we seen this stat line before? Battlecry, discover a spell. I was kind of jokingly referring to Azure Drake, but really what this card invokes is Ethereal Conjurer, which, if you guys remember, was a 5 mana mage card with a 6/3 body, but you also discover a spell. That one didn't have spell damage. Spell damage actually matters now. So if you remember Ethereal Conjurer, you might remember it as, oh my god, it's like one of the best cards ever printed for mage. It was ridiculous when it came out. And the problem with Steward of Scrolls, once again, is that stats definitely matter. You're giving up a decent amount of stats, right? And yes, it has spell damage, but stats matter. And discovering a spell, top level spells are great. Blizzard has introduced a lot of really bad spells. Whenever you discover a spell nowadays, if you haven't been doing this, start doing it, because I've started doing it. Just notice how many times when you discover a spell, how many times there's really only just one option that you're kind of happy with. Especially, when you're discovering like a mage spell, right? There are a lot of shitty spells out there. So with Steward of Scrolls, if you're looking at something like Ethereal Conjurer, well, we have to accept the fact that, number one, Ethereal Conjurer is just not as good as it used to be. A lot of cards are just not as good as they used to be, right? This is one of those things where don't get stuck in the past. With the power creep, you got to move on. You are giving up 3 stats, and yes, you get the spell damage back, but the spell damage is not
This
always
is one less stat than Ethereal Conjurer.
Yeah. You're giving up. Well, I'm just talking about for vanilla, right?
5, 6.
Yeah. You're giving up 3 stats. And essentially, once again, spells are important, but with all the card generation, you discovering an additional spell, it's not as valuable as it was in the Ethereal Conjurer days, in which there weren't that many ways to draw cards, especially quality cards. Any opportunity you had to discover a spell, it was like, oh my god, that's amazing. Like, that sort of effect was so rare and so game changing. Whereas now, you just pull spells out of your ass all the time. You discover dragons a lot, and let's face it, dragons, like, most of them have battle cries anyways. So that's where we're at. It's interesting because when I first saw this card, I was like, oh man, dude, this is so good. And then you think about it more and you're like, okay, well, it's just not as good as what you think Ethereal Conjurer should be, because Ethereal Conjurer is just not that great anymore. Now, once again, this is a card that differs from class to class, right? So let's search up, for example.
And how many times have we said that, by the way? This is a card that differs from class to class. So many. That's a well-designed neutral set. Like, this neutral set is really freaking well designed and very impactful in the arena, but also in constructed, maybe not like on the levels of everyone having complete decks, but you can put these in different classes for different things. Like, I think I'm really impressed with the neutral design of this set from a mechanics perspective. Not just from a flavor perspective, which it's overall a really nice flavor of the whole school thing and the Harry Potter thing or whatever, but just the mechanics and the power levels, I was really thinking that this was going to go off the rails. And the fact that it's not going off the rails, you've seen all the cards. We're going from top to bottom here. We're only getting closer and closer to Yeti, and then we're going to drop below Yeti. Like, this is a whole bunch of usable, interesting cards that are different from class to class and that do not break the game.
So, to give you guys an idea of the differences in scores. Steward of Scrolls in Mage. So if we're talking about Ethereal Conjurer, let's bring up the class that actually had Ethereal Conjurer. It is better. It is a 129, which
makes sense.
Makes sense. And if you were in the Ethereal Conjurer meta and we had this tier list, Ethereal Conjurer would be like so good, right? Off the charts good, one of the best cards good. Steward of Scrolls is a 129, which is pretty good. And part of the reason is just because of how good the spells are in Mage, how much you can withstand the anti-tempo that you are basically accepting whenever you play this card. And mages have great ways to deal with that, right? Whether in terms of spells or just there are various other tools. Let's go to a class like
Warrior.
Hunter.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go to Hunter because, and the reason I want to do this was because Hunter has actually really good spells, right? Some really good spells. But with a class like Hunter, it is only a 112, and a lot of that comes from the fact that you're giving up a little bit too much stats. And Hunters are a little bit
They have too many cards.
Yeah.
And they need to keep using their hero power every turn. It's a whole thing.
So with a class like Hunter, is Steward of Scrolls a bad card? No, it's not a bad card. 112 isn't terrible, right? This is around where a Yeti is. But you have to accept the fact that even with something as good as discovering a spell, and in Hunter, which has some pretty good spells, on the top end, you just can't really accept that tempo loss. It's a little bit too big. So another card that has some pretty big variability, and we can look at it in Warrior as well. Steward of Scrolls is real low. It's a 108. Right?
Yeah, which what spells do you want from Warrior, right? And obviously not spell damage and all that stuff.
Right. A lot of the removal spells that Warrior has don't rely on spell damage. It relies on conditions. So the spell damage isn't used as much. And also Warrior is typically a tempo class. They can extract value, but you don't want to put, you don't want to sort of loosen up on turn 5. Right? That's when you still want to be pushing the issue. You can loosen up a little bit later, but not usually on turn 5. So it ends up being a 108.
Keep in mind, 108 is below Yeti, but it's not bad, right? It's just you would prefer a lot of cards over it. But if you have it in your deck, you're not oh no, I'm a Warrior, this is terrible for me. You're okay, I have a card that's a little worse than a Yeti. I'll live.
Yeah. So this is really interesting because I think it just really goes to show where we are, what the progression has become. And, we can kind of cry about power creep and everything. It's just something we have to accept. And I think it's really interesting, right? Where we see the comparisons to world beater cards before. And we're that's pretty acceptable now.
Yeah.
It's fairly acceptable. Ethereal Conjurer, it used to reign supreme. Now it's nowhere near there.
Yep. Makes sense to me. All right, moving down some more. We're at 114 now. This is basically a Yeti. You now have your Intrepid Initiate. What? A 1-mana 1/2 is a Yeti? Okay, so first of all, just like Steward of Scrolls is probably going to go up by 5 points when we do the whole thing in a couple weeks. Intrepid Initiate's probably going to go down by a little bit, probably 5 points. It's probably going to be a little below a Yeti instead of a little above a Yeti, but whatever, it's basically a Yeti, right? 1-mana 1/2, spell burst, gain +2 attack. Okay, a 1-mana 3/2 is really good, but you only get it when you have the coin, and then you have to actually use the coin, so you need to have that 1/3/3 curve. And then they have to not play a 1-drop, or else their 1-drop is going to deal with your Intrepid Initiate. So it's really one of those situations where when you hit it and you get it early on, it's insanely good. It'd be like a 160 or something. Oh, but you're not going to hit it too often. You're going to hit it, I don't know, I would estimate maybe a quarter of the time, a little less than maybe a fifth of the time. You're going to, that you have this card on turn 1, you will get the most insane value out of it. That's not that much. That being said, it's a 1-mana card. This is a spell burst that will pretty much always trigger. It's a 1-mana card, and you don't get a lot out of it if you don't trigger the spell burst, so you just kind of throw it in whenever you're using a spell. and you get a 1-mana 3/2 in the mid or late game, and you're like, okay. Like, it's a well-designed 1-drop that does normal 1-drop things, right? It's not game-changing, it's not bad. I don't know. It's like it's like the most weak use of Spellburst mechanic in the set.
It is a really weak use of Spellburst. So once again, when you look at something like this, you better make sure that that you're getting value out of that spell you're using, because this is a card that I was really sort of thinking about when I'm saying not every spell burst is going to trigger, because you don't want to waste some of your spells. If you didn't really want to use your spell anyways, you don't want to waste your spells on just something like this, like kind of a small effect. You do want to save it for that Onyx Mage Scribe.
Yep.
So a lot of these smaller effects, don't take it to be automatic, because you don't want to waste your spells on these.
It's more, it goes the other way. Like, if you have to use a spell anyway, right, you throw this in.
Sure, yeah. Okay. So we have a 1-drop. I find it, we're just sort of like jumping from, it's like 1, 8, 1, 8, all of this stuff. But
this will be the last card for this one. It's the one that's exactly tied with Yeti. It is a Pen Flinger, it's an Elven Archer, and you can return it to your hand for Spellburst. And then like play it out again and return it to your hand again, and then play it out again and then return it to your hand again, and you get the point. What's Elven Archer? Let's see how many points it gains on Elven Archer. Elven Archer is a 98. This is a 113, so it gains 15 points on Elven Archer for the ability to be another Elven Archer sometimes.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And you know what? It's a good card. I think this is a card that a lot of people have been high on recently. I think this is a card that, like, the more people think about it, the more they're like, oh, you know what? It's pretty freaking good. And yeah, the fact that you're able to kind of refresh it over and over again. Once again, this is definitely not a card that you're like, oh man, I gotta activate the spell burst. But you can just sort of like get it over and over again, and then keep on adding sort of like a 1 mana, 1 damage, and keep on outputting it. And that's pretty useful. And if not, well, Elven Archer has a place in the meta, right? You sometimes just draft it anyway. So any sort of upside on that is great. I love the design of this card. It's pretty fantastic. And I think it belongs here. It's like, your Yeti level ish card, but it's got a lot of small kind of, not snowball, but like continuous effect to it.
For the record, this is like Explorer's Hat to me. I will never take this at where we value it. Like, I just hate these kinds of cards that like keep doing whatever. Like, I would definitely take a Yeti over it. But if you have the kind of deck that supports it, right, which I think people normally draft more often than I draft, and you play in that style, right, it gets more use. That's why it's coming out here. It'll drop by, like, this is one of those cards going to drop by like 5 points or less than, maybe 2 or 3 points, and end up like a little bit below a Yeti, but it doesn't matter. It's pretty much a Yeti like level card. Alright, and that's it for our relevant cards discussion. These are the cards that are Yeti or above and not in the top cards. Because the top was so low for a Scholomance Academy, like, these cards are all just like all very usable good cards. And much like Ashes of Outlands, actually, you're just gonna see like all these cards. Like, think about all the Og Merchants and like, I don't know, well, all the cards that the Ashes of Outlands have added that are in that power level. Like, it's good. I'm pretty impressed with Blizzard between Ashes of Outlands and Scholomance Academy. They seem to finally have figured out, or finally cared about, putting neutrals in the same band. Like, there's not a lot of bad neutrals, and there are no like extremely ridiculously overpowered neutrals. So this is good. Like, it may have taken them 5 years to get here, but this is a great set so far. I'm just very impressed by the neutrals in this set.
Yep. Okay. Who do you want to thank for this video?
Let's thank all the people who help us do stuff. We have so many people who help us do things because we're lazy, and because we have day jobs, and because we have like 18 things to do just for the stream /podcast/ videos / tier list, all this other stuff. So huge shout out to ZD Man, who is the tech director, who's actually making this tier list possible. In fact, he's poking me right now to make me talk about some legendary cards with him. As we are recording this live, he is working out the last 5 legendary cards. Because we are running out of time like that. And that's why you hear me mention the like change that we know we have to do, but it's not going to get done for 2 weeks because we couldn't squeeze like 2 full days of like weekend work into this and still get it out. So we're just accepting the fact that we know this entire thing is going to be like 5% inaccurate compared to what we were doing before. But ZD Man's been like just amazing throughout this whole tier list process, and he's been here from the very beginning of when this tier list became an algorithm and stopped becoming just me and Merps putting numbers onto the paper. And as the year goes by, higher and higher percentage of this is algorithmed, and maybe 2.5 years ago, we hit something like 99% or 98% at least of all cards by offering rate are actually algorithm rather than us making numbers up. And today, it's well over 99%. By offering odds, it's probably 99.9%. So it's quite an accomplishment, and they are largely right, although the last set, Ashes of Outlands, and the Demon Hunters did present some troubles. So we actually had to do more work with the algorithm than we thought. We were like, this is great. And then they changed freaking assumptions on us. And this set is just adding so many cards that's changing our like end game calculations. Blizzard just keeps messing with the game, and we keep up with it. So huge shout out to ZD Man. Also a shout out to David Attenborough Says, who is sending these stuff up on YouTube. All the videos getting released, all the videos putting up. That is him. And we have Soren, who is our 12-win editor, who will hopefully have something to do soon. We haven't played Arena much in the last month, but we will be playing a lot of Arena when this releases. So want to give a shout out to those people and all of our mods. I see you all in the chat. You're here every night. You don't get thanked much.
By
Cass. You. Oh, okay, just me. Cass, Alahud, Legendheart, by the way, who is I want it on record that I have probably learned more about Battlegrounds from Legendheart than anyone else, because he's basically coached me every single night I played Battlegrounds. Merps coaches me like sometimes, like on Sunday, and Merps has more hands-on coaching, but I bug Legendheart all the freaking time. And he's a top 50 Battlegrounds player, so I'm getting good advice here. But yeah, and all the other mods who are not typing in chat right now, and so their names are not at the forefront of my mind. But I love you guys, and all the former mods who are no longer mods for various reasons. Just much love for helping make this possible.
Oh, all right. Thank you guys. And tune back in when we talk about the rest of the neutrals. See ya.